how do I know that? Well, because there's jealousy amongst you. You're striving with each other. I want to be better, I want to be faster, I want to sit in the front, I want to sit in the back. You're just behaving in a human way. And now, if you follow me, there are two propositions. We can live as people of the Spirit, or we can live as people of the flesh. Now, by the way, even when we're living as people of the flesh, we're still people of the Spirit. And oddly enough, even when we live as people of the Spirit, we can still behave like we're people of the flesh. There's a problem. But there are two realms, and things happen differently in these realms. There's a realm which I want to call the carnal realm, which is the realm of sin and self-consciousness. And there's a realm of the Spirit, which is a realm of faith and God consciousness. And I'm going to make a very simple point to you, but hold the picture of those realms in your mind. And imagine, will you, that wherever you go, whoever you are goes with you. Does that make sense? Now, what happens if you, who are spiritual people, are in the realm of the carnal, the sin and self-conscious realm, and in that realm, you're able to give messages of wisdom. You're able to speak words of knowledge. You're able to exercise faith. You have gifts of healings. You can prophesy. You can discern. You can use tongues. You can use interpretation. The problem is, in that realm, you're going to use the gifts of the Spirit not for the common good, but you're going to use the gifts of the Spirit for self-interest, self-recognition, and self-validation. But the problem is, the gifts still work. Just because God works through the self-conscious isn't a sign of God's approval, it's a sign of God's grace. Because the gifts and the calling of God are without revocation. So what are you going to do? Now this is a problem because what's happening is that once I'm operating in the gifts of the Spirit in the means of the flesh, then those gifts lose a lot of their value. Somebody can give you the same gift. Someone can give you the same thing. One person gives it to you as a present. Another person gives it to you as a wage. Another person gives it to you as a bribe. But it's the same thing. It's still a Rolex watch or whatever it might be. It is what it is. The gift is still the gift. What's changed is the motive that sits behind the gift. So I'm not saying that people who are in the flesh can't operate in the gifts of the Spirit. Of course I can. Of course I can. God knows I've done it. Hello? But the issue is what's going on here. Because how differently do you think things would feel if you are operating in this same realm of the Spirit out of faith and God consciousness? What would the difference be when you prophesied? What would the difference be when you moved in a word of healing? What would the difference be when you spoke in tongue? What would the difference be when you heard an interpretation? Wouldn't that feel different to you? It seems it would feel different to me. Now watch. So Paul says now, we've already heard the first bit, now concerning spiritual people, I don't want you to be ignorant. Then he says this, watch this. You know that when you were pagans, you were led astray by mute idols, however you were led. This verse has been plaguing me this week, and I've been thinking to myself, I know that Paul cannot possibly be thinking about temple statues and, all these sort of things that these little icons and stuff that if you've grown up in Catholicism or whatever other faith system you might have, I thought, no, Paul can't mean that. These have to mean something else. And it occurred to me that Paul is again speaking in the metaphor again. And I thought, if these idols were metaphor, what would the metaphor be? And I thought, okay, well, let's just work this out slowly. So here's what I got to. To be led astray means to be taken in the wrong direction. It means to give someone wrong directions. It means to be misdirected, misguided, and perhaps to cause someone to believe an untruth as a truth. Here's what it says in the book of Isaiah. And we like sheep have what? We like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way. Each and every one of us have gone to our own way. The way of the carnal mind, the way of the flesh, the way of sin and self-consciousness. And consequently, what it says, the iniquity for us all was laid upon him. And you know that when you were pagans, you were led astray to mute idols, however you were led. Now, I think this takes us back, if I may, all the way to the Garden of Eden. And I think if we want to understand the kind of idols that you and I are caught up with, we have to go back to the beginning of the story and pick it up from there. Because it seems to me that these two realms, sin and sin consciousness, and God and faith and God consciousness, are divided by two big drivers. Shame and no shame. In one realm, I am ashamed. In another realm, I am naked and not ashamed. It says in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 25, mark this well, and the man and his wife were both naked, and they were not ashamed. That verse is such an important verse. They had nothing. There was nothing between them. They didn't need anything. They didn't need to prove anything. They didn't need to do anything. They were naked and they were not ashamed. They never felt badly about themselves. They never felt badly about each other. They didn't disapprove of their actions or marvel at their accomplishments. They didn't impose standards of behavior on each other. They never felt inferior. They never believed that they or the other was a bad person. They never blamed themselves, and they never blamed each other if they were to make a mistake. They were just naked and not ashamed. Interestingly, the word shame means to be, and hyphenate this because it's a worthwhile word to hyphenate, to be disgraced. They were never disgraced. They would never disgrace. But they just were. They were peaceful. And the word is fascinating because the word shame actually comes from a root word which means to cause something to wither, to cause something to dry up. It carries this notion about sense of public disgrace, of this idea that you're literally being expelled. You're like being cast out of something. And I think this business of shame is something that we, each and every one of us, even though we're the other side of the cross, even though we know that Christ lives within us, even though we know we've been set free, I think that to one extent or another, shame hangs over every one of us. And the problem with shame is that it prevents us from not only being who we are, but from moving freely in the Spirit. Shame may be the most disturbing experience that any one of us will ever have. I don't think any other emotion comes to us quite so deeply as shame. When you're wounded by shame, it's extraordinary. And it can be at a low level. Shyness is a kind of shame. That embarrassment to be in the presence of strangers and not quite knowing what to say after you've said hello, and you just feel awkward and that you just stand out somehow. Discouragement is a kind of shame. Embarrassment is a kind of shame. The amount of people I've heard, I've said, why don't you go and share something? Tell us what God's been doing. Oh no, God, I couldn't. come and speak. Come and just share what God's like. No, I couldn't possibly do that. Why? Because we're trapped in a kind of shame. Self-consciousness is a shame. It's a shame that's about performance really, and about needing to, impress somebody, whoever that might be. And inferiority is, of course, all about the shame. And we heard clearly this very simple statement. They were naked and they were not ashamed. But after the fall, something radical happened. And here they are in their post-fall condition. Genesis 3. Then the eyes were both opened, and they knew they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. And they heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord. The man and the woman hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees in the garden. But the Lord called out, Adam, where are you? Adam? And he said, I heard the sound of you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself. And he said, who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree which I commanded you not to eat? And the man said, the woman you gave me. She gave me the fruit and I ate it. I wonder if you would, if I can indulge you for a few minutes. I want you to, I was thinking about this today and I thought, no, I will do this. I want you just to close your eyes for a few minutes and go to wherever you go when you're wanting to just listen. I want to read something to you from one of my books. This is a book called Grace for Grown-Ups. And there's a chapter in Grace for Grown-Ups which is called Adam, Where Are You? And I want to just read some of it to you because I think quite forensically sometimes. But this was a very strange chapter when I wrote this chapter in this book, because I just sat there and I have to tell you, I was just carried away. It was the most extraordinary thing. So if I may, I want to read something to you because I want you to hear what I was hearing and see if you can hear what I was hearing in the Garden of Eden. So let me read to you. Just close yourself in for a few minutes if you don't mind. Let's suppose that sometime before that fateful day of the fall, during one of Adam's treasured walks with God, a conversation had ensued between them. I can imagine it might have gone something like this. Adam, do you love me? Adam smiled and replied reassuringly, Lord, you know I love you. Then the Lord asked him, do you trust me? Adam was puzzled. Of course I do, Lord. What's wrong? Oh, nothing, Adam. Not yet, anyway. Look, I'm going to tell you something, but I need you to know that after I've told you, it will change the dynamics of our relationship in a profound way, not from my perspective, but from yours. Adam interrupted. Hold on. I'll never change. I'll never let anything come between us. He's starting to sound a little like Peter. If you say so, Adam, but you'll see. The Lord waved away Adam's protests and continued. Adam, everything I've created is yours. What's mine is yours, everything without exception. But I want you to do something for me. Even though it concerns something which belongs to you, I want you to stay away from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's dangerous and it will lead to your destruction. Sounds ominous, Adam replied. But look, if that's the case, I'll steer clear. Look, Adam, if you eat from that tree, you will die. Do you understand me? Adam hesitated. What does die mean? Okay, let me see. The Lord looked despondently at his beloved creation. Tell me, please. Tell me. I need to know, said Adam. Okay, well, let's put it like this. You'll feel as though I've forsaken you, but I will never leave you or forsake you. You'll be plunged into a darkness where even the light will seem dark to you. Death will awaken something called the ego, which is latent in you. Death is enslavement to thoughts. A seemingly impenetrable veil will descend upon your mind, creating the illusion of separation between you and me. Today, even as a living being, you have dominion, but in death you'll be dominated. Today you subdue the earth, but for the dead, all is vanity. Adam's mind was addled. He just couldn't keep up. Okay, all right, let's do it this way, Adam. What shall I call this, said the Lord, as a creature appeared out of a bush. It had a black and white stripes, a tail, 4 legs, and its face was angular, with 2 upright ears and a mane. Without a moment's hesitation, Adam said, let's call it zebra. And that, said the Lord, pointing skyward towards a majestic, purposeful winged creature with a hooked beak and piercing eyes, it glided effortlessly across the sky above them. Oh, Adam squealed with delight. He liked this game. Oh, let's just call him Eagle. Why? Asked the Lord. Adam thought for a moment. Well, because it's kind of obvious, I suppose. Adam liked the naming game. Adam, I need to speak to you again about this business of death. Death means that you won't be able to do things like that intuitively. You won't be able to name the creatures or anything like that anymore. You'll start thinking and analysing and rationalising and reasoning, whereas now you just know. Adam shuddered. Oh, that'll never happen. They continued their walk in silence. They embraced. The Lord looked into Adam's eyes and thought to himself, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He suppressed a tear. Goodbye, my friend. I love you and I'll never stop loving you. An odd and unwelcome sense of foreboding gripped Adam just as the Lord was leaving the garden. He called to him, Lord, where are you going? The Lord's word foreshadowed those he would one day say to his disciples, where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterwards. Adam protested, Lord, I will follow you now. I'll lay down my life for you. My dear friend, the Lord said cryptically, I will lay down my life for you. The Lord's words weighed heavily on Adam, yet soon afterwards he would step over the line, a line between right and wrong, between obedience and disobedience, a line so clearly set by God, and in so doing Adam would discover the real meaning of death for himself. Up to the point of the fall, Adam lived blissfully. He was conscious of and confident in God's presence. He lived in the present moment without a care for the future or thought for the past. Nothing inhibited his communion with God. When the Lord saw that Adam needed a partner, God prepared one for him, custom made. Unlike Adam, who was made from the dust of the ground, she was built from Adam's body, drawn from his side to stand by his side. Together with Eve, Adam was at one with God and one with himself and at one with the world. While Eve would become the mother of all of us, she is also a striking metaphor for us all. For just as the bone of Adam's bone, the flesh of his flesh, was Eve, so too are we in relation to Jesus, the last Adam. Just as we are his flesh, so too are we with him. Just as she was taken from his side, so too are we taken from his. But their blissful existence didn't last. On that fateful day, Adam and Eve did the one thing that was forbidden. They were persuaded that by ignoring the prohibition, they would become like God. By drinking from the poison chalice of self-improvement, the half-truth that their eyes would be open became a whole and total lie that would blind them from the reality of their true identity. After the fall, Adam reflected ruefully on the events of that day. He wondered why he'd remained silent and allowed the serpent to deceive Eve. Why he'd not confronted the deceiver there and then. Why he'd not stopped her. Why he'd jeopardized everything given to him by God. Those thoughts haunted Adam. He replayed the vivid images over and over in his mind. The illicit juice coursing down the side of Eve's mouth. With an impish grin, she extended her hand. And as she did so, all of creation groaned inwardly. It was though the universe held its breath as she moved the fruit around inside her mouth. Urges that she had been unaware of began to stir in her. She glanced at him seductively. Something perverse was stirring in his heart too, something dark yet compelling. Something about her beguiled him. Adam was riveted by this new sensation. It overwhelmed him. It was lust, a bizarre, intense compulsion that overrode his higher instincts. The good that he wanted to do, he could not seem to do. A war was raging inside of him. She handed Adam the contraband. The serpent remained poker-faced, somehow managing to keep his composure, although he could hardly contain himself. Creation, as they had known it, now hung by a thread. The birds squalled and climbed into the heavens. The trees swayed furiously. The animals stood motionless as the angelic host looked on in incredulity as the entire created order cried out, Adam, don't do it. We beg of you, don't do it. As Adam struggled with himself, trapped between life and death, Eve goaded him. She looked so different, beautiful yet sensual. Oh, Adam, she said, don't be such a prude. Where's your sense of adventure? Here, taste and see the fruit is good. You've no idea what you're missing. Adam's mind was swimming. Strange things were stirring in his heart. He had no language to describe what he was feeling. Ignoring the turmoil, feeling unable to resist, he took the fruit and ate. The moment Adam's teeth pierced the skin of the fruit, there was a corresponding crashing feeling in his chest, then a hideous ripping as though his heart was being torn from its moorings. The serpent let out a devilish scream of victory that shattered the tranquility of paradise. The sky rumbled black and the moon bled crimson red. The angelic realm fell to its knees and wept. Their intercession was intense, but it was too late. Creation groaned inwardly. Within an instant, the colour faded from the world. The proud willow tree wept and has been weeping inconsolably ever since. Unobtrusively, the Lord viewed the proceedings from a shaded part of the garden. Watching Adam die was agonizing. Jesus wept. A darkness covered the land. Adam could feel himself plunging deeper and deeper into chaos. A veil of illusory separation had come down on his life. He sunk to his knees, clutching his chest. His whole body was ablaze. What was happening to me? He felt hot and cold at the same time, and voices, dear God, stop the voices, the accusing, the condemning voices. Make them stop. Look what you've done. How could God love you? Adam was like Superman, doused in kryptonite, powerless and pathetic. He felt like a stranger, dispossessed. My God, why have you forsaken me? The silence was deafening. The line to heaven was dead. Eve was hysterical. Her eyes were now open. She saw her nakedness. She could see something, feel something happening inside of her, which became engulfed in these feelings of unbearable self-consciousness. Instinctively, she covered her breasts. Adam, too, was feeling acutely embarrassed, uncomfortable in his own skin. He scrambled for cover. All Adam's instincts abandoned him. Everywhere he saw signs of decay. His beloved garden was turning into weeds. He put out his hand to reach one of his favorite flowers. He'd named it Nettle. As he touched it, he recoiled because it stung him. Creation was already showing signs of rebellion. Adam called the lioness that was standing close by. They'd always had great fun together rolling in the garden. The lioness stared offensively and roared. It was deafening, it was terrifying. Wave after wave of negative emotion swept over Adam, overwhelming his sense of deep sadness and anxiety. In the shaded area of the garden, the father turned to the son and said, "Who will go for me?" Jesus turned to his father and said, "Here I am, send me." God nodded with approval, then extended his hand and said, "Yes, but your hour has not yet come." Just when Adam thought that things couldn't get any worse, he heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden. A sensation seized him. It was fear. Without hesitating, he hauled himself, his still hysterical Eve to her feet, and they scurried towards the undergrowth with the intention of hiding from God. How could he answer the Lord's searching question, "Adam, where are you?" He was dumbfounded. To Adam's ears, those innocent words sounded dark and accusatory. The voice of the Lord spelled danger, spelled punishment, spelled retribution. His dark thoughts so overwhelmed his spirit that he was deaf to the gentle intonation of the Lord's voice. Adam thought, what's he doing here? Why has he come to torment us? Irrespective of the fall, the Lord had not changed his heart concerning man, but self-evidently man's heart had changed concerning God. The familiar and welcoming voice of the Lord triggered unfamiliar and unwelcome feelings. God's voice had always brought joy, but now it struck fear into Adam's heart. Covering and cowering in the bushes, Adam and his wife looked apprehensive at each other. We're naked. The latest sensation that came upon them as they surveyed their nakedness was shame. They were ashamed. The corruption was spreading. Two thoughts sent Adam's mind racing in different directions. You fool, what have you done? And what will become of you? Having been made a little lower than God, Adam had now become so base he felt barely human. He was a pathetic sight. He'd sunk to a new low, feeling no higher than an animal. He'd exchanged truth for a lie, love for lust, humility for pride, joy for fear, dominion for damnation, and a life of this living Hades. He couldn't think straight. Everything was muddled. Everything was confused. In many respects, these exchanges provide the storyline for the entire Bible. It's essentially a story of resuming an open, free relationship with God, where we are free and from self-consciousness, a relationship in which we're moved from hiding from God to being hidden with God. The events of the last few hours were taking their toll upon Adam's fragile emotions. He wept. He knew he was naked and he felt ashamed of it. In their chaotic mindset, he and his wife could only think of one response to the overwhelming sense of shame. So in a desperate attempt to cover their nakedness and become acceptable to God, they made loincloths for themselves. This one act of self-made righteousness was the first act of legalism and became the foundation of all of religion. But there's one more twist. Just as faith gives birth to courage, fear gives birth to cowardice. When confused with the question, did you eat the fruit, rather than taking responsibility and apologizing, he did something extraordinary. He blamed his wife. The woman you gave me, she made me eat. And the Lord said to Eve, what is this you have done? But rather than putting her hands up and confess, she followed suit by saying, the serpent deceived me, and I ate. The truth is that since that moment, that story has played itself out over and over and over and over again. And there were 3 idols, I think, dumb, mute idols, that have taken us astray. The idol of performance, the idol of approval, and the idol of blame. Performance is what I do, plus your opinions of what I do, which equals my self-worth. And here's the kicker. I will use the spiritual gifts I have got to impress you. And the moment I do that, the gift is contaminated. You see, when you follow the dumb, mute idol of performance, you become a performance addict. Oh, we talk a lot about addictions to alcohol, addiction to drugs, addictions to sex, addictions to all kinds of things. But let me tell you, at their heart is an addiction to performance. And that addiction to performance is believing that perfecting your appearance or some way achieving some kind of status will secure the love and respect you demand and need from others. There is an internal conversation that goes on inside of each and every one of us. The more we achieve, the more we will be loved. And I'm telling you something, I unfortunately am rather heightened in my in-touchness with this in my own life. My story, as many of you will know, is the story of a child that was rejected by his parents. I don't know who my mother is. I don't know who my father is. I was swapped over with my brother into an orphanage. And from 45 days old, the day I was taken into an orphanage, I was hardwired to perform because I needed to make sure that people would not, under any circumstances, reject me. And I would use whatever it is that I had at my disposal to make sure that didn't happen. And you know what? God endowed me with a dangerous amount of talent to be able to make sure that I could always get on the right side of that line. And God has endowed you with a dangerous level of talent to make sure that you can get that done for yourselves as well. And yet, the more you achieve, the less satisfaction you feel. You can achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve and achieve, and every achievement just feels like you've managed to avoid a failure. Doesn't feel like success to you? Because it's not success for you. You need another fix, another shot, another hit, another performance, another thing to achieve. Because you've not understood, because you were broken the same way as I was broken. Our goal is not achievement, our goal is fulfillment. Our goal is not happiness, our goal is contentment. They're different things. They're different things. The idol that led us astray called approval is a problem idol, because it starts by giving me the belief, the same belief that Adam had, which was to say, I am an invalid. And understand something. When we talk about invalids, we think about people in wheelchairs. We think about people with learning disabilities. We think about people that that are partially sighted, and all the things that people talk about within their organisation, making fair adjustments to make sure these places are okay for people to work in. It's got nothing to do with that at the spiritual level. It's about feeling invalid. And when you feel invalid, it doesn't matter whether you're able-bodied, it doesn't matter whether you have 20/20 vision, it doesn't matter whether you're the most beautiful person on the earth, you still feel invalid. Hello? How does Whitney Houston feel invalid? What am I missing? How is that possible that someone like her feels invalid? I don't get it. But I do get it. And so do you get it. Because we must be accepted. We have to be pleasing to people. We have to drive for that. And guess what? I'll use my spiritual gifts to make sure that you don't reject me. And again, I'm using the giftedness I've got for the wrong reason. How about the idol of blame? I must never fail. Ever told yourself that? I can't afford to fail, you crazy. I must never fail. If I fail, my identity is threatened. It's much easier for me to say, the woman you gave me, she made me do it. Every Christian I've ever met, when they do something wrong, goes, the devil made me do it. The devil made me do it. Look, my prayer today is really simple. It's that I want us to come into an understanding of what it would mean for us to simply be naked and not ashamed. What would that mean? Let me show you something. There was a very interesting little verse, and it said, Adam heard the sound of the Lord. He heard the Lord. But when he heard the Lord from the fall, he heard the sound of the Lord and he heard judgment. He heard not good enough. He heard failure. He heard guilty. And because he heard that, something was triggered in him called his ego. And his ego said, I need to feel special and I need to seek approval and I must get stuff done. Because I heard the sound of the Lord. And I know when I hear the sound of the Lord, that's not a good sound. Because he's come to judge. And what happened was that the moment he moved into the realm of hearing the Lord through the ear of guilt and condemnation, which triggers in him the egoic self, which needs to be special, needs to be better, needs to put everyone down so they can rise themselves up. By the way, most of the harm that people have done to you is not because they want to make you look small. They've just been trying to make themselves feel bigger. And so if they can put you down and say bad things about you, then it gives them the ability to look taller than you, so they can be the tall poppy, because they don't like tall poppies, because the problem with you being the tall poppy is that God might like you more than he likes me. And we already know he's come to judge the shortest poppy in the field. So that made me afraid. And when I was gripped by fear, everything else starts driving, because then I'm going to run from God. That's what Adam did. He ran and hid from God, and he finds himself, instead of running to God, he runs from God. And because he runs from God, he now doubts God. He doubts that God is good. And can I tell you that all religion is trying to do is to say to you, we've got some stuff that if you do some good stuff and do the stuff we do and come twice a week and come on Wednesday and make sure you fast and make sure you go to the prayer meeting, make sure you pay your tithes, you don't have to worry when you hear God, because we can keep you on the right side of God. We know what God's like and we've got some pretty tight rules, but we figured it out. That's what religion is. You can dress it up whatever way you like, but that's what it comes to. It's all about this business of shame. But now watch. Because if I'm using the gifts of the Spirit in order to get me this stuff, then I'm just going to get myself damaged. And I'm going to get everybody else around me damaged too. Remember that? To each was given the Spirit of God for the common good. As we think about bringing us to some sort of conclusion today, I want to make sure that we we don't miss this. Because the truth of the matter is that you need to be released from feeling badly about yourself. You need to be able to let that go. God is not holding you to account for it, so why are you holding yourself to account for it? You need to be released from disapproving of yourself and from despising your accomplishments. You need to be released from that conversation you're having with yourself that says, oh, this is all I've done and look how old I am. I should have done more by now. I should have gone further than this. You go to the school reunion, you haven't been with a group of people for 25, 30 years, and you think, oh my God, can I not have some sort of headache or car crash so that I don't have to go? Because I know very well that everybody who's been at my school is going to be much more successful than me. You need to be released from that because it's not your truth. It's not your truth. You are exactly where God needs you to be and are precisely where God needs you to be at precisely the right time that God needs you to be there. And you are God's perfect story. You're not a failure. You're not a car wreck. You're not an unsuccessful story. You are what God has purposed you to be. You need to be released from that notion of feeling inferior because that feeling of inferiority is stopping you from recognizing that you are really a child of God. You need to be released from that sense that you think you're a bad person. You may have made mistakes, but that doesn't make you a mistake. You may have done bad stuff, but that doesn't make you bad. You may have failed, but that doesn't make you a failure. That's what we call learning experiences. Hello? That's what we call building a testimony. That's how that stuff works. And you need to be released from that. It's very important. It's very important. I was going to tell you the story, time beats me, but I was going to tell you the story today about Gulliver's Travels. I remember reading that story as a child. I just could not get my mind around that. How can it be that a giant man can go into a land called Lilliput and be taken captive by 6-inch-high Lilliputians? How is that even possible? Yet, let me tell you something. Every single one of you has been taken captive by the Lilliputians. These little 6-inch nobodies have been able to tie you up and hold you back and keep you down from reaching your destiny because they keep talking to you and ministering to you from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and telling you all the things that you learned when you were pagans. But I do not want you to be uninformed about those things because you are spiritual people and there's no 6-inch midget or 6-foot giant that can hold you back because you are spiritual people, the children of God. And we need to live in the power of who we are. Spiritual people, gifted spiritually, to live supernaturally, not bound by the rules of nature, not bound by the laws of this world, not bound by the realm of the carnal mind, but freed and liberated in the Spirit. He who the Son set free is free indeed. And we need to live in our freedom. But the stories that we're telling ourselves, we need to be set free. We just need to be set free. Now, there are a variety of gifts, Paul says, but the same Spirit. Varieties of service, but the same Lord. Varieties of activity, but the same God who empowers everyone. To each has been given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. And here's the thing. If we want to operate at the highest level of the Spirit, we must understand that the fallen man heard God. The spiritual man hears God. And when the spiritual man hears God, they hear without any assumptions and prejudgment. They don't hear God speaking negatively to them. They don't hear God speaking words of failure. And because they don't hear God judging them or making assumptions upon them, they don't judge and make assumptions about other people. They're able to flow in the same grace that's come towards them. But if I hear God is judging me, guess what I'm going to do with you? I'm going to judge you. But if I recognize that God would never judge me, why would I ever want to judge you? If I start from the position to say God makes assumptions about me, and Ryan, the assumptions God makes about me are bad, and therefore I need to feel better about myself, so I need to find some assumptions about you that aren't good either. But if I'm free of all that, why am I going to assume bad things about you? Why am I going to prejudge anything from you? The spiritual man believes in the spirit of equality. And they know that they're able to treat everyone well because we have come together for the common good. What's yours is mine, what's mine is yours, and we are together. We're just one. There's just us. It's the oneness, it's the usness, it's the isness of God that we're experiencing. Because of that, I can be authentic. I don't have to pretend to be somebody else. I can be who I am. God can be authentic with me. I can be authentic with God. I can be authentic with you, and you can be authentic with me. And then we can have a spiritual community. We can have a spiritual community when you're pretending to be some religious somebody that comes in here on a Sunday morning and you're all dressed up with your hat and all the rest of it, and you go out on a Monday afternoon, you're just as bad as the devil. What's all that about? It's about saying, no, we are an authentic group of people that God has set us free to be who we are, and we just need to be who we are, please. Would you just stand up and be who you are? We don't need you to be a copy of somebody else. We don't need you to be some kind of hologram from Jesus. I'm not interested. I don't care if you wear WWJD bracelets and have a rosary bead. I'm not interested. Just be who God made you to be. And we'll be fine with that. But because God respects me, hello? I can respect myself. Because I can respect myself, I can respect you. How can I respect you if I don't respect myself? And how can I respect myself if I don't think God respects me? What's wrong with you? This is how this thing flows. It's a ministry of grace, of love, of life, not of condemnation. And because I know God loves me, and because I know I'm free of all that, I can seek value from our diversity. See, the thing is, we are so wedded to sameness. Have you any idea how invested in sameness we are? I remember the first week, let me just be plain with you. I remember the first week that Brent came with flags. We were going, what's with the flags? Right? We don't do flags. We did flags in the other place. Remember that? With the Evangeli babies. We did it over there. We don't do it here. No, listen, don't do that here. Because we're invested in sameness. But guess what? He was given permission to be who he is. Now everybody does flags. And that's fine. We don't do whatever it might be. Somebody comes in with a different something emphasis, a different voice, a different tongue, likes that kind of music and doesn't like that kind of music. Oh, I don't like that kind of music. That's not spiritual music. That's not the kind of music that appeals to me. Really? Is that right? Well, good luck to you. Because there is a diversity in the Spirit. There is a variety in the Spirit, but it's the same Spirit. But when we're free in ourselves, when we're free from ourselves, when we're free to be ourselves, let me be clear about it. There ain't anybody in the room that doesn't walk around with a whole bag full of prejudices, right? Let's be clear about that. Because we all have prejudgments. The question is, are you able to ring fence your prejudgments so they don't become discriminatory behavior when we're amongst each other? You know I have a working prejudice against Arsenal supporters, and what has God done? Put me in the church to the nearest football ground to our church is Arsenal. What are you going to do? But then it's a missionary work, I think. That's the only way I can see that. A mission to the pagans. But anyway, there it is. No, but I'm playing with you. But here's the point. If you believe that God doesn't judge you, if you believe that God treats you equally as well as the person next to you, if you believe that God is wanting you to be authentic, that respects you and is seeking in you to get value from the diversity that you bring, then that's going to change the whole way that we behave with one another. So I want to just take a moment, invite Catherine back if I can, just to settle us for a second, because we need to shed some of the shame. We need to be free of it. We need to shed the guilt. There's no place for it. We need to be released from the shyness. It's not cute. It's not cute. We need to be released from the I can't possibly speak in publicness of it. It's not cute either. God has given you a voice. Women, God has given you a voice. And you don't have to shout to be heard. It needs to be able to flow. Let's bow our heads for a moment. Father, I know there have been times that we have been led astray by dumb and mute idols. But we are not uninformed. And today, Lord, we are choosing to just come back to the truth. I pray, Father, that this morning that you would release anybody in this room who is under the grip of shame, that you would just loose them and let them be free. You would loose them and let them walk in the fullness and the freeness of life. Father, I pray your peace would rest upon them.